And thanks again for having me here.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm bringing a dear friend of mine and super talented activator, Kyle Gray. Kyle Gray is a wonderful human and a world-class presentation coach, a story strategist and author who helps coaches, startups, and executives use storytelling to better communicate their unique value to improve sales with their audience. He combines timeless storytelling with cutting-edge marketing to ensure you've got the right story to tell when you're presenting on a sales call or in a conversation, both online and offline. Welcome, Kyle. I'm so excited to have you today.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me on the show and for the labor of love that you have really put into this. It's an honor to be here, and I hope that some of the things I have to share can be a big impact for both you and your audience.
It's my total pleasure. Kyle, you've made a huge difference in my life. So we, for context, have met down in Miami. Kyle was facilitating this world-class speaker mastermind. And by some whim, we had connected, total strangers. I flew down and we had the most transformational weekend of biohacking, dialing in our signature speeches, and really working through some of the blocks. Let's be real, that what we as coaches, right, or entrepreneurs sometimes face when it comes to being so in the weeds of your own marketing and being so familiar with your own products and your own programs that sometimes there's these blind spots that disconnect from what your audience may need to hear in order for them to see themselves as succeeding and working with you, or to actually just be drawn and magnetized into whatever it is you have to offer. I'm really stoked, and you had shared that there's a couple amazing secrets that you are going to walk us through today. Do you want to share a little bit more about how you got started in the speaking industry?
I'll start with a little bit about how I got started speaking, and I'll also share just what this kind of storytelling is really about. And while mastering storytelling and kind of the first layer that people come to me, they want a story created quickly. They want a story that can help them enroll more of their clients. They want a story that enables them to, when they talk about the things that they do and they get excited in their hearts, that it actually lands in the same way in their audience instead of kind of confusion and overwhelm. And like you said, the process of becoming a high achiever, of getting to where you or I or most of the people listening in on this show have gotten, we have to get a few wires crossed in our lives and in our minds. And this means often we're addicted to our achievements because it's helped us get to where we are. It's helped us get through those early stages. But this implies that a deficiency of self. And this impacts not only how we speak, but the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis, what we decide to do for our marketing, who we decide to hire, how we lead our teams, how we lead ourselves, what even we are doing when we're not businessing. All of these things it impacts. And most of the time, most of us are ignoring treasures that are right under our noses. So I've been in the speaking world for about 10 years. Before speaking, I started out as a blogger, content marketer. I worked for a startup called WP Curve, helped them tell their story through writing, and helped them grow to about 7 figures in annual recurring revenue. And I left right before they ended up selling to GoDaddy. And then I had a good reputation as a copywriter, as a marketer. And simultaneously, during those early times, I was also very, very sick. I had an autoimmune condition and some really bad digestive health. And I didn't really understand what was going on with me at the time. But over the course of a couple of years, I figured out I had this diagnosis called Hashimoto's disease. Somewhere around 2017, I met my first life coach. Even the words life coach, they have like this charge to me, this negative association, but he delivered exactly what a life coach should. I remember on one of our first calls, like in the first little bit, I was like, I'm stressed out. I've got to work so hard all day and I don't have any time for anything. And he's like, what if you did like 15 minutes of breath work in the morning when you woke up? And I was like, what are you talking about? 15 minutes of breath work? That's not productive. I don't have time for that. What are you thinking, man? And then he said something even more outrageous. I was so offended at the audacity of this statement. I was like, this Hashimoto's disease is ruining my life. I'm cursed. I'm certain this is the worst thing ever to happen to me. And he's like, what if Hashimoto's is your superpower? And I laughed at him. That was the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I almost hung up the call. I was outraged at how stupid this was. I was so sure that this was the worst thing ever to happen to me. I would have joint pain everywhere whenever I would get like wrist pain. And when I figured out how to take care of the wrist pain, somehow it would go into my elbow. It would be in my jaws. I would wake up with anxiety every morning and I wouldn't know like why I had anxiety. I certainly wouldn't think, oh, my gut dysbiosis is really getting me today. It would be like, oh, my world's falling apart. I'm not working hard enough. The other political party is ruining everything, or whatever the case may be. But it was never, I have biological anxiety. This was terrible.
Interesting.
This was terrible stuff. About a year later, as I was moving into the speaking space and storytelling space and growing my skills as a copywriter, I was facilitating a workshop full of speakers who wanted to position themselves as great speakers and get on more stages. And this one just so happened to be filled with health and wellness experts, people who were very into the same things that, like the clinic that we were at just a few months ago. And I remember sitting next to one woman and she says, "Hi, my name's Dr. Grace and I help people overcome chronic autoimmune conditions through better gut health." And I remember thinking, wow, so your clients must want this. They try and do this, but that happens. Reflecting on the horrible experience of the last few years of being sick. And for the first time, my experience, my personal experience, my life, combined with everything that I was learning as a storytelling, as a copywriter, as a marketer, and they combined. Oh. And I discovered that who I was, and in fact, the things that I was certain were terrible things, were shameful things, were bad things that condemned me, were actually things that would set me apart in a marketplace of people who really needed my help, because I could help them share what they're doing and translate their message into something that they needed. They would pay well for my services. And instead of being just another copywriter, just another marketer, I became the person for the health and wellness space, which became one of the main groups of people I've worked with. I've since expanded to healing and transformation in many different kinds of ways, but they all have the same problems. They're too smart for their own good. And they get lost in the details of how to solve the problem rather than who they are. And in that moment, my story, my who I was, set me apart. And this is the same thing that I see time and time again in everyone that I work with. We're sitting on a treasure chest of our stories, our experiences, and we refuse to open it up or look at it because we think we've associated it with the wrong thing entirely. And I have to trick my clients into opening it up and into believing in it and into experiencing it and feeling it to actually start to connect with what's possible. And that's why people come to me. We write talks that help you make more money from the stage. That's awesome. But when we start telling and articulating your story differently, you make different decisions as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as a partner, and as a person.
This is incredible. And I can see so much of myself, in your path. And I can also see these flashes of moments where, I've worked for 7-figure spiritual brands. And when we were supporting, these healers and practitioners and coaches and getting set up, they would be so, like I said, like weeds deep, right? In the midst of their modality. And they would call it this quantum shamanic Reiki technology, and we have to heal our shadow self and our inner child, and all these things that are like advanced terms for most people. They're like, I want to get rid of anxiety, like I just want to feel better, so there's this level of detachment between how can we actually meet our people where they're at so they understand and know this is the right person to help me with this.
Exactly. Most people, we curse ourselves in a way by becoming great experts. And a lot of times when somebody thinks like, how do I communicate about what I do? We think, what feels good or exciting for me to communicate? And a lot of times when we're saying like the quantum spiritual healing, when we're speaking, we're trying to speak to ourselves or a mirror of ourselves and what makes sense to us and what's exciting to us. And this is why a lot of people have the experience of they get on stage or they get on a podcast and they feel like they're on fire. They feel like they're doing awesome stuff. they're sharing their best knowledge, everything's going good. And
Yeah.
then when the time comes for the call to action, if they even get a call to action, a lot of times they're going to go 20 minutes over and get kicked off the stage before it happens. But nobody reacts. And then they're like, I was sharing good stuff and I felt really smart when I was doing this. So either my stuff's not actually that smart or nobody cares about me, where really just communication wasn't actually happening and you were trying to please yourself instead of thinking about the audience.
Ooh, that's tricky. Okay, so there's some ego, right? Like inadvertently we want to help people, and people get stuck in this ego thing of seeing themselves as needing to speak to the equivalent of who they are now. Whereas when we're helping people, they're usually a couple steps behind us, which is why we have the wisdom to help them. How can we like reframe it, or what would be the right reframe to actually bring it down to meet people where they are currently able to relate?
Yeah, so this is a great place to start about the 3 kinds of stories that we can tell to double your sales when you're speaking on stages, when you're speaking on podcasts, when you're speaking on webinars. We already experienced the first one a little bit. It's an origin story. And what we want to do with an origin story, or I call it an authority story, is the way that I create these with clients is I'll ask you questions like, what are the 3 biggest problems that your client has? And we do this in a somatic approach. They write out their 3 biggest questions. And I do this every single week. I publish an episode of this on the podcast, and people they don't get it until they like feel it. But we ask, okay, what are the 3 biggest problems? And we ask, okay, those are bad problems, but how would somebody, your ideal client, experiencing this? Maybe they're sitting with a friend at coffee, and how would they describe those problems then? We talk about those. Okay, that's pretty big. Okay, I see. And then how about they're calling you at 3 a.m? They're in their biggest stressed state. They're pouring out their heart and soul. They're confessing things that they've never confessed to anyone before. What are they saying? Okay, that's very interesting. And then I like to, especially men and women, but women are a little bit better at this generally. I say, okay, I'm going to read this back to you, and I want you to feel where this occurs in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll do that. And then they'll say solar plexus, it's in my throat, it's in my heart, whatever, doesn't matter. I'll say, when have you felt like this?
Cool.
And so then if we just try to do it from the mind, our mind is not, unfortunately, not like Google. And we can't say, brain, come up with the perfect story to speak to my clients.
This is so
It
cool.
redacts these things, and the story that we should tell is going to be redacted. But if we go somatically, then these moments will appear, and I will ask, and usually people do something called defensive teaching, where they will be like, oh yeah, I felt like this in 2016, and here's how I solved the problem. They will immediately try to be like,
not too much.
Yes.
Not going there.
They'll avoid it. I'll be like, no.
And suddenly I
want to know.
Had it all figured out.
I want to know what it smelled like in that room that you were in. I want to know what you looked at outside of the window in your office on that day. And I want to know what exactly was going through your head. And we find a moment. And this is a tender moment that most people don't want to talk about. And the magical thing that we do that will change your orientation to this moment for the rest of your life and open up a whole new world of possibilities is, instead of saying it exactly how it happened to you, we use this moment as an opportunity to paint your client's language on top of it. And all of a sudden, this moment, just like me, I was cursed, Hashimoto's disease, bad, you're fired, life coach, becomes, wow, this is my gift, my superpower that set me apart. I'm proud to share about this. The same thing happens, and it becomes, like you said, when we do it in service to our client, when we put our client's language on top of it, then we can tell the story about a moment of weakness. And that's not all that happens in an origin story. Then we go through a process of discovering what our unique process and style is. And we have a specific way of describing how we create the unique cocktail that becomes our solution. And then we reflect the opposite moment. Whatever those 3 pain points are, we think about, what is the opposite? If I have no cash flow, then I have plenty of cash flow. If I have no time, then I have tons of time. And this is also a hard one for people to find, but like, when did you feel the victory? When did you experience the promise that you promise all of your clients? And then we weave in a story just like that, and we paint our clients' language on that. And if we put these three ingredients together, we have an origin story. And the purpose of an origin story is not to say, this is everything you need to know about me, now buy my stuff.
Right.
It's just enough to get us open to listening to the rest of what you have to say for the next 45 minutes. And if we can just put that, if we can calibrate the story, that's all it has to do, then it puts a lot less pressure on us, because again, we're high achievers, and we think that every single story and every single thing we teach needs to do the whole job of selling somebody entirely, and they should just be running to the back of the room. But when we really like distill it down to, here's the micro purpose of what we're doing here, it adds a lot of relief.
I think it feels better for both sides too, right? Like, don't get me wrong, when people have a hidden agenda where they're overly attached to making the sale, converting, like, you can feel it.
Oh,
Even
yeah.
if you're a heart-driven entrepreneur and you want good things, if you're overly fixated on the conversion, like, it will repel people because they'll have their guard up. Like, it feels like you're being hunted, right? So I think this brings in so much authenticity.
Yeah.
And nobody really wants to be sold to these days. We're bombarded with ads and social media all day long asking us to sign up for this and purchase that. So if we can be the algorithm interrupt, like, by nature, even if it takes a few touch points, you're going to be that much higher in their periphery because they actually trust you, they resonate with you, and they see you as a human that's done something incredible.
I would say, especially if you're a heart-driven entrepreneur, this is even more important. If you're not heart-centered and you really are conversion-centered and you have a great offer, then go for it. Like, absolutely go sell them. But most people, if you do have heart and you do want to make an impact and you do this, the incongruence is going to be so much more obvious and detrimental in you than somebody who isn't heart-centered. And everybody listening here, so sorry, good news, bad news, listeners, but you've got to figure this out. And when you do, things are going to be so much easier. You're going to be so much more magnetic, and you get to replace the effort and the trying hard and the addiction to achievement with real alignment. And I promise that things get easier and better.
This is insane. Yeah, I've personally witnessed this magic. Like, when we were in Miami, Kyle did bring us through the proprietary, mechanism, right? Or your kryptonite. Like, as a result, what is the elixir you're coming back to? And you see this following so many, even like mystical frameworks, like the hero's journey, right? Where now you have acquired these skills, this wisdom, or this breakthrough. Your purpose is now to share that with the world, right? And what better way to do that than through the art of storytelling?
Yeah. So this gets us open. Our authority story gets them open to teaching. And then what I really like to talk about, which isn't necessarily storytelling, but is so important, is what do we teach and how do we teach? And a lot of people come to me and they think that if I can teach them as much as I possibly can, then they will believe that I am an expert. And we're trying to teach them to prove that we are an authority, like we're reading our resume to them instead of actually serving them.
Okay.
And so what we want to do, and what I do when I structure my teaching, I like to ask questions. Again, what are the biggest objections that somebody would have to working with you, or somebody would have to being successful with you? And we start by orienting what we teach to target those things. If we can do that, then I ask them, what's one thing that you could teach to open up their perspective on these things? And a lot of times that can be a really simple thing. And we don't need to teach them everything they need to know to solve the problem. We just need to get them thinking about the problem differently. And then we can tell a story about a client who experienced this same thing. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'm going to tell a story about a client that demonstrates this idea, and I'm going to show you how to tell a story about a client within this. So one of my clients, Nicole Jardim, came to me when she was launching a book called Fix Your Period. She was helping women with all kinds of hormone problems get back in control of their hormones and their life. And when she came to me, she was hoping that her book launch was going to make her enough book money and make her be an authority. She had a publisher, but I knew that this wasn't going to work out well. And I was like, why don't we put together a group program? And when your book launches, we're going to do a speech and invite people into the group program. And she thought that was a great idea. So we're starting to write her signature talk. And I remember I say, Nicole, what's the first thing we need to do to get back in control of our periods? And she says, well, you need to fix your blood sugar. I know 12 ways to fix your blood sugar, and just goes, listing them off, pow, 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 knowledge.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Nicole, I'm going to pretend to be one of your clients. I know I'm not a very convincing, but maybe with hormonal problems in the beard, I actually kind of am. And I say,
Maybe.
Nicole, I'm a hopeless person. I've tried diets. I've tried exercise. I've tried everything. I'm exhausted. There's no way I'm going to be able to do 12 things to fix my blood sugar. But I will do one. And I promise I will do it with my fullest heart. But it has to be the easiest. What is that? And she's like, well, that's chew your food more. But that's boring. Like, who wants to hear chew your food more? What's the good in that? There's nothing useful in that. And like, I've already talked about all of there is to it. And she was in this like very achievement mindset. But we spent some time actually exploring, what did it mean to chew our food more? One, I can chew my food more, and I don't actually have to change my diet to start experiencing results. If I just chew my food a little bit more, then my digestion improves, my blood sugar improves. And that's a relief to somebody who's been struggling with this for so long. And it's just the right dose of information that as you talk about chewing your food a little bit more, even if I'm just in the audience listening, I start to feel a little bit healthier. I start to see the problem a little bit differently. And yes, of course, like I can't just chew my food more and get all of the results that Nicole is promising. There's a lot more work to it. But if we can just get them thinking about the problem a little bit differently, seeing new possibilities, opening up to new avenues, then they will be ready to take the next steps with us instead of trying to teach them all of the 12 ways, which are necessary, which are important. And they're not always going to be that easy, but we're not trying to convince them of everything right now. We just want to get them opened up, and that's the right dialing in. Now, this program or this signature talk ended up helping her sell out a group program right in the book launch and continue to sell it out several times over, which she wouldn't have made very much money with the publisher in the book in the first place. And this became a foundation for a much more sustainable business for her. And this is how you tell a story about a client that you've worked with. And now I've just talked to you about, this is what it's like to work with me. And here's how I did this shift for one of my clients. And here's the result that they got. And I was teaching you in a way that felt valuable. People were leaning in and it made sense. And nobody felt like Kyle's trying to sell me something right now. And so we tell client stories like this that support our ideas, but also show this is what it's like to work with me. And this is how I shifted this person's perspective. And here's the results that they got. So if we can orient that objection and that small idea and then show a client's case study of how they applied that shift, then we start to open people's minds up. And this is how we teach to really get people wanting to work with us and picturing working with us as we're teaching, instead of being overwhelmed with 12 different ways to lower our blood sugar and getting freaked out.
This is amazing. So I'm seeing like 3 huge benefits right away. So one, in NLP, we talk about like shrinking the problem, right? So first they have this thing that they've tried everything, like they feel like they cannot be fixed, right? So the same way you felt cursed. And now we're just taking this thing that they cannot overcome and we're putting into context of something that you could action, right? That doesn't take $1 billion or like rocket science. Like in other words, chewing your food can already start giving you noticeable improvement. Then we also have like the living proof, right? So this person is the real life living proof as a result. Like I was you too. But a lot of people, I see so many amazing, business owners, they have this proving thing. And this has been a theme for myself in my early days to unravel too, of trying to do everything under the sun to convince that you're the right fit or the right expert. And suddenly it's almost like if you're going to a buffet and you're sampling and you give out samples for every single thing that you can do, you're not going to be hungry at the end, right? Like if you teach everything, there's nothing left over to even purchase. Then they come away satiated, which is awesome. But then there's no, need to actually take the work further.
It's like a comedian that is in a club and there's a bunch of normal people and then there's a few comedians in the back and they're trying to do comedy to impress the few comedians in the back. Or with health experts, they're so obsessed with like, I need to have the scientific studies to cite every single thing I say.
Huh,
and they're trying to impress the other scientists or their peers or the people
right.
above them instead of actually speaking to the people that need them. And I see this play out over and over, and you're pointing it out. It's just we're
Yeah.
speaking to the wrong people because we feel insecure and we feel the need to prove ourselves. It's imposter syndrome. And this is the bad news about imposter syndrome is whether you are at a $0 a month business or you're at a 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure a month or year
Yeah.
business, imposter syndrome is always going to come. It's always going to show up. You're never going to be able to outrun it.
Mm,
But the good news is the secret is always the same to fixing it. And you think about who you need to serve instead. Get over your shortcomings, get over your insecurities. There are people that need you more right now. And when you can focus on serving them and orienting your stories and your
mm.
teaching to actually serve the people that need you, things become easier. Isn't it so much nicer to talk about chewing your food for a 10-minute teaching point instead of 12 blood sugar things and like cramming it all in and clicking through your slides like a machine gun?
Yeah.
No.
I also feel if I was putting myself in the situation and I was watching a hypothetical presentation, if you give me a list of 12 things I should be doing, I'm probably not walking home with any of them. But if I
Mm-hmm.
was seeing how one small thing, opened up an entire world, I'm much more likely to also implement that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So the reframe here is really going from trying to speak as someone who may have people from their industry, right? Peers, people they've trained with, people on the same playing field, and feeling like you need to show your expertise to others who are doing similar things, to actually being way more people centric around the people that you want to support, serve, invite into your offers, and just ignoring the rest, like drowning out the rest. Is that right?
Yeah. And it seems so it like sounds very obvious when we say it that simply, but it's not intuitive at all because most of the time we have spent 10 years or a little
Mhm.
more or a little less becoming problem solvers, becoming really good at what we do, and we spend a lot of time with our peers, and what seems normal to us
Yeah.
is not really normal to our audience. And so
Mhm.
it's just like what comes intuitively or what feels right to us is not necessarily what's going to be right, which again, a
Oh,
lot of the times I need to trick the people that I work with
yeah.
into experiencing this before they can really believe me.
That's really fascinating. Okay. I'm a huge believer in asking like intelligent questions right before I do anything. Usually like a what would it take? What would it need to be true? So what is one thing that you would suggest as a sort of prompt or mental reframe before we go to do these things, to give a talk, to make a post, right? That would allow us to shoot our arrow like in the right direction with
Mhm.
our stories.
So with an origin story, we would think it's not an origin story is not when did I originate as the hero in the story. The origin story is when did the problem originate for me?
Okay.
What problem am I speaking to in my audience, and when did I feel that?
Mm,
Or if we want to teach something, we ask ourselves, what objection or limiting belief do I want to address? And then what's one simple thing I could do to open their mind up to new possibilities?
amazing. That's so valuable. So
Mm-hmm.
cool. Okay, so we talked about the three stories and some of those blind spots. Do you want to share a little bit more about your perspective on story alchemy and how you almost view it as a martial art?
Yeah. So creating a signature talk, which is the first level of working with me, is in many ways like creating your first yoga asana, which is just like a form that you practice over and over again until it becomes natural, or a martial art kata, which is just like I practice the chop, then the punch, and then this block. Or a lot of times, if anybody's seen the movie The Karate Kid, um, Mr. Miyagi, the martial arts master, makes Daniel wax a car for like so long. He's like, wax on, wax off. And he's like, I'm tired of this. When am I going to learn cool kung fu stuff? And by the time he's like so frustrated and so blocked, then Mr. Miyagi like shows him that he's been teaching him how to block punches every single way. And so when we can practice a signature talk, it's so much more than simply having one core talk, which is great. And most people make back their money that they invest in me with just having one talk. But when you start to practice the talk, and like what you saw in the retreat, which was really cool, is we saw 6 or 7 people practicing an origin story.
Yep.
And they had different details, but they were all following the same shape of the story. And the beautiful thing about this was we weren't just exploring what the content of the story was, but how we were telling and why we were telling it. And we started seeing the shapes of the story. And what happens is when you understand what makes up a good origin story, what makes up a good teaching point, then you can start to be present and meet and shape these stories live. Instead of when you understand it, you can, instead of like standing in front of your ideal client and thinking to yourself, what do I need to tell to prove to them that I'm an authority? We can say, what is this person saying to me? What are their problems? When did I feel like this? We actually become present. We start to listen, and we can shape our stories live. And this is the real mastery of it. So what we learn in a signature talk, we can start applying inside of our podcasts, inside of our messaging, inside of our emails, inside of our sales calls. And the beautiful thing is when storytelling is an act of listening first. We need to, it's always started, what's the objection I want to overcome in my client? What's the problem I want to address in my client? So we start to listen. We start to become more present, which allows us to a much easier way of going about our lives instead of constantly trying to prove ourselves. And then when we can start to examine our own stories and our own lives, there's this magical, transformative, therapeutic thing that happens.
Yeah.
Where we've had so many stories and so many things that we are so sure are our condemnations, our flaws, our biggest challenges actually become the things that are gifts to us because they're gifts to our audience and allows us to serve. I'll tell you, somebody that you met, the reason that we were at this most incredible biohacking clinic in Miami, JR. JR had us as coming to there. He was working as CEO for a long time. He worked with me for over a year. And at our first retreat, which happened in March, I remember him telling a story about way overworking, working 18-hour days, traveling all of the time. And this was causing a lot of strain with his family and his kids. And he came home one day and got in a fight with his wife, and then went to his daughter and asked his daughter if he was afraid, or if she was afraid of him. And in his story moment, he like kneels down in front of the room and he says, "Livy, are you scared of daddy?" And she says, "Yes, especially when you and mommy fight."
Oh.
And you could hear a pin drop in the room when he did this. And he starts sharing this story in front of huge groups of like health executives. And so many people came up to him touched because of this. But there was a problem, because the way that he was working and living, he was also overworking. He was flying to Miami and was spending a lot of time there working 18-hour days and not having the time. And he was in the same problem that he was before. And I can't say that just telling the story differently started, but the contrast of sharing that story and reflecting on his life the way he was, he had to make different choices. And over the course of a few months, started rearranging his position there to only be working in the nonprofit, and eventually decided that this work wasn't a fit for him anymore. And where in the past he would have just continued to work, he would have continued to provide for his family and overwork himself, he started looking for more opportunities. And this was a very difficult and scary process. But now he's working in a couple of different businesses that way more respect his time. He gets to live in Minnesota with his family and spend time with his kids and go to their softball practices and their hockey practices, and is living in much more alignment. You can see it now. And this is what story alchemy really means in the long run, is telling your stories better means you start to make different choices in your life. And you start to become more in alignment with who you are as a visionary leader. People start out, they want the talk to help them make more money. And then as soon as you make more money with a better story and a more aligned story, then you're like, wow, maybe my visionary time and my creative time is actually more valuable than me putting out fires all day, every single day, because that's what I've known how to do. And then slowly you start to stand up for yourself and your value more and more, and you make different choices. And this is what I see. And this is why I like to work with people, not just write one talk in a single day, but over the course of 6 months or a year, your life totally changes. And you don't even recognize yourself at the end. What becomes normal at the end, and like what's happening in the very beginning, you will astound yourself.
It's true. I've witnessed this. So in the Miami retreat, right, we came in as total strangers, a group of different professionals from different industries, and we were brand new. And by day one, after refining our stories, also like lowering our barriers to really be vulnerable and to actually not just skip to the part where we're the hero, but to actually like go into the depths of those life-shattering moments, right, where we know we need to do something different. We were all moved to tears. There was like big, bulky grown men like crying like like a baby, because it was so touching. And through that, there's almost this responsibility, right? Like with that level of awareness, by going over it again and again and again and again, like you have to come out a changed person, because you've extracted all of the wisdom. Like you're no longer in it, but now you're almost like you're stewarding it, right? It feels to me like, storytelling in itself is almost like this sacred technology. Like I really do believe that. Before we had computers and microchips and Google Drives and, clouds to like transmit memories, that's how we passed on wisdom. That's how we passed on things that we've learned from. That's how, generations grew, right? So it's the same kind of thing in a more condensed setting that really does set your soul free.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the first technology. And there is a formula to this, that if you can learn how to master, this is how we change. And yeah, I hope that it's useful for everybody. It's deceptively simple in a world where we love to complicate and over effort things. And if you can start to see this, yeah, the best part is a great story can change your life. And after hearing this, everyone in the audience, it doesn't have to be somebody else's story anymore. Your story can change your life and so many other people who need you now.
I love that. I could see this also being huge for even a parenting lens. Like if you know the frameworks of how to move people and persuade or open people's eyes, you can also use this with your kids, right? Your family, if you want to change behavior. And God, there's so many different settings I could see this being excellent for. Thank you so much for sharing. There's so much value in this. You really are like a wealth of resources on this topic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for providing the platform and the reflections, and you've come a long way, and you've built your own brilliance to be able to receive and guide this. And I'm so grateful for you coming and joining me in Miami, and now offering this space to share this. The pleasure is all mine.
Of course, I'm sure this will reach all the right people. And even today, it's a great reminder. I saw myself actively in some of the things you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Oh yeah, I gotta go back to this. It's a continuous process of refining. So there are opportunities to connect deeper with Kyle. We're going to drop his website, thestoryengine.co, as well as his Instagram. He's a great person to connect with. I totally recommend being in his world. And we had mentioned briefly just before jumping on, there may be an opportunity for select people to have a deeper experience with you. Could you share a bit more about that?
Yeah. If you want to listen in and hear this process come to life with all kinds of people every single week, I have a podcast where I take people through this storytelling process, and I ask questions and I co-create stories with my guests every single week. And I recommend you go to podcast.thestoryengine.co and take a look at some of the episodes there. And if you think you're a good fit for the show or would like to go through this yourself, I take applications for guests, and you can find the application button right there at podcast.thestoryengine.co. And if you're a listener of the show, if you're inspired by Melissa or many of these things, I would encourage you to reach out to me and connect with me. And I would love to walk you through this process live on the podcast. And if you're not quite a fit or you're not sure yet, listen to a few of these episodes and see how this happens every single week with somebody. And I astound the guests every single week. They get to be showcased and featured in a brand new way. They get to share themselves with their audience and discover themselves at the same time. And I would love to feature you next.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your gifts and genius, Kyle. I will certainly be checking that out myself. And for everyone tuning in today, thanks for your presence. It's great to share space with you. And I trust that, all the right people will find everything that they need within this setting. Thanks again for coming on today.
Thank you, Melissa.
All right. Bye-bye.